flex the wrist, you might say, okay, that face opens a touch. Then if I rotate my arm and rotate the shaft, that club face gets back to being what we would class as square. So the release, I get asked loads of times about the wrist positions through contact. Today, let's show you some real truth and evidence. I've got hack motion on my hand here. We're going to examine a few normal shots I do and also some experimental stuff to show you where the wrist should be at contact for maybe even more extreme cases. Okay, so my belief is that the wrists at contact should be what I call in the flex state. There, right there is minus 13 degrees of flexion. That's where I believe they should be at contact. Now, a lot of golfers, particularly golfers on YouTube, will sort of say to me that you have to get it sort of overtaking the club head to create speed. Now, all the good plays I would test and all the good data I've seen from tour players, they're kind of minus 10 to minus 18 at contact in this kind of wrist flexion. So wrist flexion is this wrist kind of bowing forward like this. Again, that position there is minus 21. So if I get it back to here, that there is plus 8. So there, the club head is slightly overtaking my hands. So anything in the minus gives us some shaft lean. Tour players average 11 degrees of shaft lean. So we're talking somewhere around there with the flexion. So that's what we're looking for at contact. Now the wrist journey, if you like, varies player to player. It does. So at the top of the swing, ideally I'd want to see this around about 10 or minus. Right there at the moment I'm minus 8. So if I go to here, that's 0. That's a flat wrist right there. And then most golfers I would see, and I'm certainly around about 10 degrees of flexion, of extension, sorry, at the top. So what normally happens is we get a wrist that's flattish at the top, let's say, that would bow more on the way down or flex more on the way down. And then ideally at contact being that flex state to produce that strong club face that we're looking for in that ball first contact. Now, if we have just flexion, so I'm here and I just go into flexion, I'm looking at the screen here, that's minus 12. You might say to me, okay, will that produce a more right shot? Well, if we rotate and work on a circle, then obviously that's changing the direction in which that club face is pointing. So if I'm here, flex the wrist, you might say, okay, that face opens a touch. Then if I rotate my arm and rotate the shaft, that club face gets back to being what we would class as square. And please bear in mind, when we make contact with the ball, we actually want the face to be fractionally open. When the ball leaves the club in that separation phase, then the face wants to be pointing at our intended target. So the club face is going to go from being kind of open like this at contact, rotate and release the ball in the direction that's straight at target with the straight club face. Now, most golfers, and nearly every amateur golfer I would test, would have the wrist not flexed enough here at contact. So we can encourage this huge amount of flexion at contact all day long. That's minus 18 there. So if I was going to set up here and just try and hit a small shot like that, that for me is going to encourage the right moves. So that one at contact was minus 17. If we look at the graph on that one, you'll see there the graph is working nicely, and the wrist goes into that extension phase very, very sharply, or more extended after contact. So let's try and hit a normal shot and look at when the wrist goes from this flex state to this extended state, and this should be pretty sharp. Okay, so that one there gets to extension into positive numbers fairly quickly after contact, and at impact that was minus 9, and that's a pretty standard swing for me. Plus 5 at the top, minus 9 impact, only plus 8 address, which is less than I probably say I'd have normally. So normally at address I'd probably have it a little bit more into this extension. So the story really is basically, we do not want ideally that motion at contact. And I'll try and hit one now where I get that position at contact, where I try and get the wrist extended before the ball, and we'll see how bad it looks. The only way I feel like I get close to that was have no weight shift, no pressure shift. That was still minus 7 at contact. So it's ridiculous the amount I have to try and get this like this to get it into that positive numbers of contact. Let's try one more. That's positive there, okay? So to get it positive, that's the kind of position I'm looking at impact. What elite golfers do we see like this at impact? Exactly. 0. Oh, that felt horrid. It's still minus a contact. It's still minus. I cannot, I really cannot get it that way. What you'll see in the graph though, it gets into extension quite rapidly. It's hard. Again, using the live screen here, I can do it. That's where I want to be, minus 14. That's where a lot of golfers feel they should be. So what happens if we do get this wrist into extension before contact? You'll see here with the club face, we add a lot of loft. We're going to basically make the ball go a lot higher, a lot weaker. If the club head's overtaken the hands pre-impact, we're likely to hit the ground before the golf ball. If the club bounces off the ground or skims the ground, then we're going to hit the ball very thin. It's a very weak position to be in. Again, if we shift pressure, move our hands forward like I'd want you to, minus 21. That's the kind of positions we're starting to get into there. So basically, we want the handle forward, and in order to create the maximum kind of speed, it then is going to go into this extension quite rapidly. The club will feel like it goes much more kind of vertical up and through this phase, and that takes the wrist from being flexed to extension post impact is the key thing. So when we release, we're releasing the body, we're releasing the arms, we're releasing the hands, we're releasing the club head, the timing of which is kind of in that order: body, arms, wrists, club head. So the body will turn, the arms turn, we get this kind of stored energy, then we're going to throw that club, and that throwing action is that releasing action that we definitely all want. We need to use the arms to create speed. They're the final thing in the chain. I always describe this to golfers when they're in my studio as like if you were going to whip someone with a towel. So if my hand never decelerates, then I don't create any whip in the end of the towel. And vice versa, if this happens too early, the whip happens before it would make contact with the person we're trying to whip. So what we want to do very much is have the timing of this whip, and the same as this, the timing of this kind of release to be at the right stage. So it's kind of at its maximum point post contact, but it is straightening out as we come down for sure, and it's going into the different phase post impact. And that extension phase here, we kind of go there and extend. The frisbee kind of move definitely helps create control in the club face, stop the club kind of wrapping over